June 11, 1962, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, the most secure prison in American history. An island surrounded by some of the most treacherous water on the West Coast. In 29 years of operation, no one had ever escaped and survived. At 7:15 in the morning, a guard began his routine cell check on B block, bed by bed, number by number. Cell 140, occupied. Cell 141, occupied. Cell 142. He looked at the face in the bed. It looked back. He looked closer. The face did not blink. Frank Morris was gone. John Anglin was gone. Clarence Anglin was gone. Left in their beds were handmade heads sculpted from soap, toothpaste, and toilet paper, painted with stolen maintenance shop paint, and fitted with hair swept from the prison barbershop floor. 3 men had outsmarted the most secure institution in America. Their tools? Spoons stolen from the prison dining hall, an electric drill made from a broken vacuum cleaner motor, and more than 50 raincoats stitched together in secret. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in American history. They never found the men. In 1979, they declared all 3 dead, drowned, case closed. Except they weren't sure. And in 2013, a letter arrived that proved it.
Welcome to Explorica Global, where we uncover the stories the world overlooked.
The plan. Frank Morris arrived at Alcatraz on January 18, 1960. He was inmate number AZ-1441. Prison officials flagged him immediately, not for violence, for intelligence. His recorded IQ was 133, higher than 98% of the population. He had spent virtually his entire life in prison, convicted of his first crime at the age of 13, and he had escaped from every facility that had ever held him. Alcatraz was supposed to be different. It was built specifically for men like Morris. He looked at the walls and started planning on day 1. The tools. The ventilation grill at the back of each cell was set in 8 inches of concrete. 8 inches, not steel, concrete. Old, crumbling, salt-saturated concrete that had spent decades absorbing Pacific fog. Morris examined it carefully. Then he began collecting spoons. Over 6 months, Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin, and a 4th inmate named Alan West used spoons stolen from the prison dining hall, saw blades scavenged from the workshop floor, and a drill improvised from the motor of a broken vacuum cleaner to slowly, millimeter by millimeter, carve through the concrete around their ventilation grills. They worked exclusively during music hour, the one period each day when the prison piped music through the cell block to calm the inmates. And Morris played his own accordion to add to the noise, masking the scraping of spoons on concrete. Every day, they concealed the progress of their holes with painted cardboard panels cut to match the cell walls exactly. Guards walked past those cells hundreds of times and noticed nothing. The workshop. Behind the cells ran an unguarded utility corridor, a narrow service passage that led up through the plumbing to the roof of the cell block. Once through their holes, the men had access to this corridor unsupervised. They built a workshop up there. On the unused top floor of the cell block, a space the guards never entered, Morris and the Anglin brothers spent months constructing everything they would need. The raft was made from more than 50 raincoats, donated or quietly stolen from other inmates. The coats were stitched together and sealed using the prison's own steam pipes as a heat sealer. They built wooden paddles. They repurposed a concertina to use as a pump to inflate it. They fashioned life preservers from the same raincoat material. They made fake bolts from soap to secure the roof ventilator so it could be opened and replaced without detection. The dummy heads were Morris's masterstroke. Each man sculpted a replica of his own face from a mixture of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper, a papier-mâché substitute made entirely from prison materials. They painted them with paint from the maintenance shop. They fitted them with real human hair collected from the prison barber shop over months, the exact shade and length of each man's hair. On the night of the escape, each man would place his head in his bed, pull the blanket up, and rely on the face to fool the night guards doing their checks by flashlight through the cell bars. It worked for at least 6 hours.
But there was a problem. Alan West, the fourth man, had fallen behind. His hole was not finished. On the night of June 11th, as Morris and the Anglin brothers prepared to go, West was still frantically scraping at the last inches of concrete. They could not wait. They left him behind.
The empty roof. Alan West finally broke through his wall at midnight and found the roof of the cell block empty. The 3 men were already gone. The only question was whether they were in the water or through it. In a few moments, you will understand why the FBI's answer to that question was never honest.
The escape and investigation.
At approximately 10 p.m. on June 11, 1962, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin emerged from a ventilation shaft on the roof of the main cell block. They crossed 100 feet of rooftop, climbed 50 feet of exterior piping to the ground, cut through 2 barbed wire fences, scrambled down a steep embankment to the water's edge. They inflated their raft, and they paddled into San Francisco Bay. The water temperature that night was 54 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to induce hypothermia in an unprotected person within 30 minutes of immersion. The currents near Alcatraz run at 4 to 5 knots, strong enough to overpower an experienced swimmer. This is what the FBI pointed to. This is what they said killed them. Here is what the FBI did not mention. The Anglin brothers were raised in rural Georgia. They had been swimming in open water since childhood. As teenagers, they were known in their community for swimming across a lake, carrying their shoes above their heads so they would not get wet. They were exceptional swimmers, far beyond average, and almost certainly beyond what the FBI's models accounted for. Frank Morris had an IQ of 133. He had studied the tidal charts. The time of the escape, approximately 10 p.m., corresponded with a high tide that would push a northward moving vessel directly toward Angel Island, exactly where Alan West said they were headed. The next morning, investigators found the raft washed up near Angel Island. Not sunk, washed up. This is critical. A raft that was overwhelmed by water and sank would not wash up on shore. A raft that reached Angel Island and was abandoned, or that came loose after the men disembarked, would wash up exactly where it was found. On Angel Island itself, investigators found footprints in the sand near the water's edge. They found a homemade paddle. They found a bag containing family photographs, addresses, and a personal letter belonging to one of the escapees. You do not carry family photographs on a raft in the middle of a bay crossing if you plan to drown. In Marin County, the mainland across from Angel Island, investigators found a stolen car shortly after the escape. There were no reports of clothing store burglaries, which Alan West had said was part of the plan, but there were also no bodies, no debris consistent with a failed raft crossing, no personal effects found in the water.
A San Francisco police officer came forward shortly after the escape with a specific claim. He had been on patrol the night of June 11th. He said he watched a small boat near Alcatraz Island turn and head directly toward and under the Golden Gate Bridge. The FBI investigated the report, then dismissed it. The officer's account was noted in the files, placed in the archive, and never mentioned publicly. In 1979, 17 years after the escape, the FBI officially closed its case. Their conclusion? Morris and the Anglin brothers had drowned. No bodies had ever been found. No credible sightings had been confirmed. The evidence from Angel Island and Marin County remained unexplained. The police officer's boat sighting remained in the archive. The FBI closed the case anyway. The U.S. Marshals Service did not close their case. They kept it open. They kept looking. And what the Anglin family had been quietly collecting for decades was about to become impossible to ignore. The FBI said the men were dead. The Anglin family had been receiving Christmas cards, flowers, and visits from the dead men for 25 years, and they had kept every single piece of evidence. The evidence of survival. Rachel Anglin was the mother of John and Clarence. She was a farm worker's wife from Georgia. She had 13 children. 2 of them were serving life sentences at the most secure prison in America. Then they escaped, and the official story said they drowned. Rachel Anglin did not believe it. She had reason not to. Beginning in 1962 and continuing every year until Rachel Anglin's death in 1973, 11 years, an anonymous bunch of flowers arrived at her home on Mother's Day. No card, no return address, just flowers every year on the right day. The family believed they were from John and Clarence. When Rachel Anglin died in 1973, 2 unusually tall men appeared at her funeral. They wore heavy makeup. They stayed for the service, stood at the back, and left quickly without speaking to the family. The Anglin family recognized them. They were John and Clarence, attending their mother's funeral in disguise 11 years after the world had declared them dead. In 1989, the same pattern repeated. When Robert Anglin, their brother, died, 2 men arrived at the viewing. They stood over the body, wept, and left without speaking to anyone. Members of the Anglin family received Christmas cards and postcards they believed were from John and Clarence for at least 3 years after the escape. The handwriting matched. The personal references, things only the brothers would know, matched. The FBI was aware of this. It is in their files. They examined the cards and reached no conclusion. The cards went into the archive. At some point after the escape, a small leather horse figurine was delivered anonymously to the Anglin family home. It was handmade. It was the exact type of craft that John and Clarence made inside Alcatraz, a hobby documented by prison staff. The delivery had no sender. It was placed on the doorstep and left. Nobody outside the prison system knew the brothers made those figurines. In 2015, a photograph surfaced that had been taken in Brazil in 1975, 13 years after the escape. It was given to the Anglin family by Fred Breezy, a childhood friend who claimed he had encountered the brothers on a farm in South America. The photograph shows 2 men in 1970s clothing standing in a tropical landscape. An analyst hired by the Anglin family examined it and confirmed the photograph was genuinely from the 1970s, not fabricated. In 2020, facial recognition technology was applied to the image by 2 independent firms. Both reached the same conclusion.
High probability that the men in the photograph are John and Clarence Anglin, accounting for 13 years of aging from their last known photographs. The FBI examined the photograph. They called it inconclusive. It went into the archive.
In 2024, Ken Widner, the nephew of John and Clarence Anglin, published a book drawing on decades of family evidence, forensic analysis, and interviews. Widner presents the case that the brothers survived, fled to South America, married local women, and lived for decades on a farm in the mountains. Widner also makes a claim that contradicts the official record, that John Anglin, not Frank Morris, was the true architect of the escape. That John planned the route, identified the structural weakness in the ventilation system, and recruited Morris rather than the other way around. Prison records and at least one former inmate's memoir support this version. The FBI's version, which placed Morris as the sole mastermind, may have been wrong from the beginning. The family had flowers, funerals, photographs, a crafted figurine, a nephew with decades of evidence. And then in 2013, the most explosive piece of evidence in the entire story arrived at the San Francisco Police Department, and the FBI kept it secret for 5 years. The letter and the recreation. In 2013, a handwritten letter arrived at the San Francisco Police Department. It read, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter went on to offer a deal. Anglin said he would turn himself in and give a full account of the escape in exchange for 1 year of medical treatment for his cancer at a prison facility. The letter contained specific details about the escape that were not in any public record, details that only the men who had lived through it would know. Investigators could neither confirm nor disprove the handwriting as John Anglin's. The DNA collected from the letter's seal was degraded and returned inconclusive results. The FBI kept the letter classified for 5 years. It was not disclosed to the public until 2018. 5 years. A man claiming to be one of America's most wanted fugitives offered to surrender, and the FBI sat on the information for 5 years. When asked why, the FBI said the letter could not be authenticated. When asked why it was kept secret for 5 years rather than disclosed immediately so the public could assist in verification, no satisfactory answer was given. In November 2025, something remarkable happened. YouTuber and engineer Mark Rober, working with journalists Johnny Harris and Cleo Abram, undertook a full physical recreation of the Alcatraz escape using period-accurate materials. They built the raft, they sourced the same type of raincoats, they followed the same construction method documented in the FBI files. Then they launched from the shore near Alcatraz at the same time of night in comparable water conditions. Their raft reached a point near the Golden Gate Bridge. The same month, a team of scientists published updated tidal modeling for the conditions on June 11, 1962. Their conclusion: if the men launched at approximately 10 p.m. and paddled north toward Angel Island, the tidal push would have carried them toward the Marin County shore, exactly as Alan West had described the plan. The physics works. The recreation proved it works. The tidal models confirm it works. The FBI closed the case on the basis that it didn't work. When asked why, the FBI said the letter could not be authenticated.
When asked why it was kept secret for 5 years rather than disclosed immediately so the public could assist in verification, no satisfactory answer was given. Where are they now? If John Anglin's letter was genuine, he had cancer in 2013. He would be in his 90s today. Frank Morris would be 99. Clarence Anglin would be 94. If they survived and lived out their years in South America, as the family evidence suggests, they may already be dead of old age. The U.S. Marshals Service has stated it will maintain active warrants for all 3 men until September 2026. After that date, regardless of outcome, the case closes permanently. After September 2026, even if John Anglin is alive in a farmhouse in Brazil, the U.S. government will no longer be looking for him. 3 men who escaped with spoons. A government that built its official conclusion on physics that has since been proven wrong. A letter that sat in a classified file for 5 years. And a case that closes forever in September 2026, whether the men are found or not. They left a hole in the wall. The government left a hole in the truth. Alcatraz Island closed as a federal prison in March 1963, less than 9 months after Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers walked out of it. Today, 1.4 million people visit it every year. They walk the same cell block. They look at the same cells. Cell 140, John Anglin's cell. The hole he carved with a spoon is still there. Tourists photograph it every day. The hole that started everything. The FBI had 17 years to find these men. They had the full resources of the United States government. They had forensic evidence. They had witnesses. They had the testimony of Alan West, who was inside the prison and knew everything about the plan. They never found a single body, never found a single confirmed sighting, never produced a single piece of evidence that definitively placed Frank Morris, John Anglin, or Clarence Anglin in the waters of San Francisco Bay on the night of June 11, 1962. What they did find, the raft on Angel Island, the footprints, the personal effects, the stolen car in Marin County, the police officer's boat sighting, 11 years of anonymous Mother's Day flowers, a photograph in Brazil, a letter from a dying man asking to come home. They put in a file and they closed the file. The case closes in September 2026. After that, 3 of the most audacious men in American criminal history will pass into legend, either as men who attempted the impossible and drowned trying, or as men who actually did the impossible and spent 60 years watching the world argue about whether they existed. Somewhere, if they are still alive, there are 3 very old men who know exactly how they did it. They did it with spoons.
Like and subscribe to Explorica Global for more.